Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. The air in the small town of Maplewood was thick with an unsettling quietude as the sun began to set, its orange and purple hues casting haunting shadows on the dilapidated storefronts lining Main Street. Nestled between an abandoned bakery and a shuttered bookshop was a small, unassuming police station. Its brick facade was worn, much like the town itself. Inside, the atmosphere felt charged, heavy with the weight of unsolved mystery. Detective Laura Sinclair, a seasoned investigator with over a decade of experience, sat at her desk, her fingers tapping nervously against the grainy wood. She had long ago learned to navigate the turmoil that accompanied crime investigation. However, the missing person case she was about to delve into was different. It bore the haunting echoes of the past. The last disappearance that had thrown the town into chaos still lingered in the collective memory, unresolved. The case file lay before her, dog-eared and frayed at the edges, its pages filled with details about Amelia Hart, a bright-eyed 16-year-old who had vanished 2 weeks prior on her way home from school. The community rallied instantly. Posters with Amelia's smiling face plastered on telephone poles and community boards made the atmosphere more desperate. A search party assembled, but returned empty-handed. Laura leaned back in her chair, releasing a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. As the last rays of sunlight flickered out, she felt the weight of not just the case, but the expectations of the town of pressure that could shatter even the most steadfast resolve. She knew she needed to uncover the truth before the shadows of Maplewood swallowed it whole. The victim. Amelia Hart was the kind of girl who brought light into a room, a vibrant smile that breached the murkiest of days and laughter that echoed with sincerity. Known for her infectious spirit, she had aspirations of becoming a veterinarian, fueled by a deep compassion for animals that mirrored the warmth she showed towards people. Friends described her as loyal, the glue holding their tight-knit group together, and her absence was still fresh in their hearts. 2 weeks had passed since her disappearance, but mornings were still punctuated by the vibrant chatter of students at Maplewood High, now team leaders who made a pact to keep Amelia's name alive. In the cafeteria, a corner table remained vacant, a tribute in honor of her seat, draped lightly with her favorite scarf, a patchwork of blues and greens that symbolized her free spirit. Laura Sinclair visited the high school one afternoon, the echo of her footsteps stark against the linoleum tiles as she navigated the bustling hallways. Students were lively, oblivious to the storm of emotions swirling just beneath the surface. Conversations halted when Laura entered the cafeteria, eyes turning curiously toward the detective. She approached Emma, Amelia's best friend, who sat trembling with a deep sadness etched on her youthful face. After exchanging brief pleasantries, Laura could see Emma's resolve wavering like a candle flickering in the wind. Each question Laura posed was met with hesitant responses, the truth locked behind a veil of grief. Amelia had been acting strange before she disappeared, Emma confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. She seemed distant, like she was carrying something heavy. Laura leaned in, her pulse quickening. This was where the story began unraveling, hinting at complexities yet to be uncovered, as shadows of secrets began to loom over the bright life that was once Amelia Hart. The crime scene. The sun hung low on the horizon as Laura Sinclair joined a handful of officers at the edge of Maplewood Park. It was a picturesque scenic expanse of green grass dotted with oak trees casting long fingers in the evening light. But when viewed under the weight of impending dread, the park transformed into something foreboding. Authorities had discovered traces of Amelia's belongings here. Days prior, a ripped backpack, a crumpled note, and most haunting of all, a locket engraved with her initial. Laura's heart raced as she stepped past the yellow crime scene tape, a tactile reminder of the darkness that could pierce even the most idyllic of settings. As she surveyed the area, a sweeping unease settled in the pit of her stomach. The once cheerful sounds of children playing blended into a mournful silence, mingling with the low rustle of leaves above. Flashes of blue and red from emergency vehicles lit the park like half-remembered nightmares. Forensic teams were scattered, carefully collecting evidence while trying to maintain the integrity of the unfolding scene. Laura navigated through the chaos, her eyes sharp as she scanned the ground, searching for clues that could reveal the final moments of Amelia's life. One officer called out, gesturing toward a nearby thicket where he had found something peculiar. Moving closer, Laura noted a narrow path, overgrown with weeds yet dotted with footprints that looked distinctly erratic. These tracks lead toward the vacant lot, the officer explained, his brow furrowed. Laura knelt beside the impressions in the earth, her breath hitching. The hints of desperate movement, perhaps a struggle, sent shivers down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened to Amelia had unfolded in two plazas where she had vanished, and another where she might have been taken. As night descended, darkening the edges of the park, questions began to eclipse the answers. Laura stood alone for a moment, surrounded by the whispering shadows, grappling with the haunting realization that the answers lay not just nearby, but buried deeper within the town's hidden histories, tainted with betrayal and loss. The early investigation. Back at the police station, the mundane flickering of fluorescent lights cast an unwelcoming glare across the crowded room. Officers busied themselves with paperwork, while maps of Maplewood adorned the walls, pinpricked with markers indicating sightings, and leads their silent testimony to the urgency that enveloped the town. Laura sat at her desk, a fresh cup of coffee cooling beside her as she reviewed the initial interviews conducted with Amelia's friends and family. Amelia's childhood friend, now a lanky teenager with nervous energy, had been her confidant and was the last person known to see her on that fateful day after school. Laura turned her gaze toward the wall where Ryan's pin marked the vicinity of the high school, juxtaposed against the path that led to the park as two worlds colliding ominously. With unease bubbling beneath her focus, Laura arranged for Ryan to come in for another interview. She watched as he entered the station, his eyes darting anxiously around the room, brow furrowed with worry. Seated in the sterile interrogation room, Ryan visibly wrung his hands, the tremors hinting at a confession ready to unfold. "Ryan," Laura began, her tone steady but compassionate, "I need to understand what happened after school that day. Any detail, no matter how small, could help." Ryan's voice wobbled, betraying his struggle to articulate the chaos in his mind. Amelia seemed off. She had received a text just before we left school. Wanted to meet someone, but she wouldn't tell me who. Laura leaned in closer, sensing the urgency of his words. "Did she ask you to come with her? Did she seem scared?" "No," he replied, shaking his head vigorously, his posture crushed beneath the weight of guilt. "But I just felt like I should have done something. I should have gone with her. Laura noted the guilt gnawing at him. This was more than youthful regret. It felt layered with something darker, something he might still be hiding. As their conversation continued, Laura guided the discussion, probing deeper into Ryan's relationships, searching for unspoken truths among his ramblings. Each word he spoke painted a broader, picturesque silhouette of a young girl whose vibrant life was now dulled by the shadows of uncertainty. As the interview drew to a close, she couldn't shake the feeling. Ryan, burdened yet earnest, held keys to secrets unmentioned. Tension anchored her, the fragility of their connection pressing on her resolve. In a town steeped with secrecy, not every bond could be trusted, and yet, unraveling Amelia's mystery might lie directly within the entanglements of these friendships. The dead ends. Days turned into weeks, and as Laura sat at her desk, the tension in the police station grew thicker, suffocating. Maps still dotted the walls, but trends had emerged. Patterns weaving brittle threads, knit with heartbreak. A heat map of leads flared with red circles marking the interviews held. And yet the effort felt Sisyphean. Each breadcrumb transformed into a dead end, spiraling into further uncertainty. Frustration clipped Laura's every word, a harsh edge to her tone as she spoke with Officer Sam Bennett, her partner. What we have is a trail of whispers, nothing but static. Every time we think we're onto something, it fizzles out. She tossed a crumpled paper toward the center of the cluttered table, a futile gesture born of desperation. Let's not lose faith yet, Sam replied, leaning back in his chair, hands clasped behind his head. We still have the forensics report from the park. They flagged a few things. At the mention of the report, Laura shifted with a newfound focus. Those remnants from the scene, what might they reveal? If there was anything at all that could tie this together, she replied, a faint glimmer of hope still fighting off the shadows. Time passed slowly as they pored over the findings, but each item they picked apart held little promise. A fragment of a locket with Amelia's initials, traces of fabric that matched her backpack, and remnants of a phone number scrawled hastily on a crumpled note. However, when tracked down, the number didn't belong to anyone in the vicinity of Maple. It belonged to a defunct business in a city 200 miles away. Laura raked a hand through her hair, frustration bubbling toward a boiling point. Every effort felt futile. With each turn, they encountered blind alleys strewn with false leads. The local chatter had turned agitated, fueled by gossip and fear. The town wanted answers, but the walls closed in on them. One looming reality biting at their heels. More they searched. More it revealed their impotence against a collective grief that settled into the very bones of Maplewood. Leaving the station late one evening, Laura stepped into the night. The moon hung high, the streets illuminated by a ghostly glow. She could feel the weight of the townsfolk's anticipation pressing down on her, a reminder that for each dead end they hit, a piece of Amelia's story slipped further into darkness. Resolved to find the truth, she walked with purpose, knowing somewhere deep within the heart of the matter lay just beyond the reach of their understanding. A break in the case. The morning sun rose with a fresh certainty, illuminating the gloom that had clouded Maplewood for far too long. Laura arrived at the station early, a sense of purpose coursing through her veins, fueled by an adrenaline rush that traced back to the night before. She had spent hours poring over the case files, driven by an instinct that anything might reveal itself with renewed scrutiny. As she stepped into the office, the receptionist glanced up, her expression suddenly shifting from routine to intrigue. "I'd want to see this," she said, sliding a folded piece of paper across the desk. Unfurling it, Laura's heart raced. It was a handwritten note dropped anonymously in the mailbox outside the station. It said to check the old textile mill. The receptionist continued, eyes wide with anticipation. Laura's mind raced. The mill had been abandoned for years, a crumbling relic of Maplewood's industrial past. It had become a haunt for local kids, a backdrop for ghost stories. But was it a hiding place for something darker? Gathering a team, she briefed them as they navigated the narrow streets toward the mill, the weight of expectation mingling with trepidation. The air was taut with the promise of discovery or potential danger. A slow stream of adrenaline surged through Laura as the hulking structure came into view, dark and brooding against the clear sky. Inside, beams of light filtered through cracked windows, dust motes dancing in the stillness. Officers spread out, examining the dank corners where darkness coiled. Everyone's instincts were heightened, a palpable tension crackling in the air. Laura led the way deeper within, scanning walls smeared with graffiti and neglect. As they reached what once served as the factory floor, she spotted something faintly metallic glinting amid the debris. Moving carefully, she knelt down and brushed away a layer of dust to reveal a silver bracelet, encrusted with colorful charms Amelia's. "Look at this," she called. The team gathered around her, the reality of the moment setting in. This piece of jewelry tied their case to the mill with a visceral connection. This place now felt riddled with potent possibilities. But as she lifted the bracelet, the scene shifted within her mind, turning anxiety into urgency. Before leaving the mill, Laura spotted something unusual, a footprint in the dust leading farther into the decay. She glanced back at her team, determination hardening her resolve. "We need to follow this. Amelia's not far behind." As they ventured deeper, the haunting echo of footsteps reminded Laura that they had essentially turned over the disturbed earth of Maplewood. Unveiling what lay beneath was only the beginning. The suspect. The silence within the dilapidated textile mill was thick, punctuated only by the distant sound of water dripping from a corroded pipe. Laura and her team pressed on, following the trail of footprints deeper into the recesses of the building, each careful step tinged with a mix of anticipation and dread. The waning daylight rendered shadows long and sinister, illuminating darker corners that tugged at the edges of the mind. As they approached a rusted door, its hinges groaned in protest when Laura pushed it open. Inside lay a small room littered with scattered debris, a forgotten office perhaps, but one with undeniable signs of recent habitation. A half-eaten sandwich sat abandoned on the flimsy desk, the air thick with the smell of mildew and something else woefully human. Her heart raced as she scanned the room. A tattered backpack, identical to Amelia's, leaned against the wall. Laura's breath hitched, a resounding echo of adrenaline surging through her. "This is it," she murmured, nearly lost in the urgency of the moment. "We need to bring the forensic team in here." But just as she turned to call her team, the sound of shuffling echoed from outside the door, and Laura froze. The instinct to protect her team surged as she reached for her radio. "Stay alert," she whispered, her breath barely forming a sound as the tension hung thick in the air. A figure burst through the Dorian, his face a mix of fear and urgency. "Laura, you have to listen to me." He was visibly shaken, his hands trembling. Amelia was in trouble. Amelia was in trouble. She was meeting someone out here, someone dangerous. Laura's resolve hardened. "Who, Ryan? You need to tell me now." "Dave Turner," he stammered, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting an unseen threat. "He used to hang around the school. He's notorious in town ways getting into trouble. I overheard Amelia talking to him. Something about wanting to break away from. Something bad." Laura felt a chill trail down her spine as the pieces began to collide. The mysterious text, Ryan's anxious demeanor, and the evidence in the room all hinted at something far more sinister. "You didn't think to tell us sooner?" she snapped, a mix of anger and fear igniting her frustration. "I was scared," he whispered, a look of regret washing over his features. "I thought I could handle it." But then she disappeared. "Get in touch with the others," Laura ordered, her mind racing ahead. "We need to locate Dave Turner now." Ryan's face paled. "He's dangerous. Which is why we have to find him first," Laura insisted, her determination surging. They were no longer standing on shifting ground. The outline of a suspect had taken shape, one that framed a chilling understanding. There was at least one person in Maplewood who could lead them to Amelia, but the path from here would require more than mere investigation. It would demand courage to confront the shadows lurking within their own community. The trial. The courtroom was a crucible of tension, where every whisper resonated like a clap of thunder in the crisp autumn air. Tall windows filtered in slants of muted light, casting stark shadows on the faces of those gathered. Laura sat at the prosecution table, her eyes fixed on the figure standing resolutely ahead. Dave Turner. The man whispered about in hushed tones for weeks. His demeanor was unsettlingly calm, a facade that masked the storm beneath. The trial had become a focal point for Maplewood. The town had rallied around Amelia's family, their grief no longer silent but amplified through the proceedings, exposing the raw edges of unresolved pain. It had transformed into a spectacle, with the community holding its collective breath, hoping fervently for justice. Laura could feel the weight of expectation pulsing through the gallery, an audience ignited by necessity's search for answers woven into an emotional tapestry. As the trial unfolded, each witness took the stand, recounting fragments of Amelia's life, her kindness, her dreams, and ultimately her fear of Dave Turner. Ryan was among the first to share his heart-wrenching testimony, his voice quivering as he detailed his interactions with Amelia at the conversations, revealing an undercurrent of anxiety that he hadn't grasped until it was far too late. Laura watched closely as the defense attempted to undermine his credibility, questioning his motives. "Is it possible you're seeking closure for your own guilt, Ryan? That you're projecting your fears onto my client?" The implications rippled through the room, and Laura clenched her fists under the table, a primal instinct to protect the truth surfacing within her. As the trial progressed, things grew only more convoluted. The defense introduced an alibi for Turner, an elaborate narrative placing him miles away at the time of Amelia's disappearance, a story peppered with clues that were just plausible enough to sow doubt among jurors. Eyes shifted nervously. Murmurs of uncertainty floated through the gallery, tainting the air with frustration and despair. But Laura had prepared for this. The remnants of Amelia's belongings, the evidence they had painstakingly gathered, offered a formidable counter-narrative. Laura took the stand and, confident yet grave, presented the case. Dave Turner was not just an acquaintance, a looming shadow in Amelia's life who exacerbated her struggles. He instilled fear, isolated her, and ultimately silenced her. As she spoke passionately, she revealed the deeper implications of their investigation, highlighting the timeline of Amelia's last known interactions. Bolstered by corroborating witness testimonies and the chilling resonance of evidence found in the mill pieces pointing decisively toward Turner's guilt, the atmosphere shifted palpably, the tide turning ever so slightly in favor of truth. It was a challenge to cut through the web of lies, but Laura was relentless. Each statement dripped with clarity, urging the jury to look beyond the murky shadows into the light of reason. The day stretched on, but finally, the jury deliberated. Laura's heart ached with anticipation, each tick of the clock resonating with the weight of the gravity surrounding those final moments. When they returned, the foreman's voice cut through the tension. We find the defendant, Dave Turner, guilty of the abduction of Amelia Hart. A collective breath of relief courtroom erupted in disbelief and quiet celebration. Tears streamed down Amelia's mother's face, joy and sorrow intermingling. Laura felt a rush of vindication, but also the realization that justice, while monumental, could never fully erase the absence of the vibrant girl whose laughter once filled these hallways. With a heavy heart yet a fierce resolve, Laura understood the road ahead was still long. But in that moment, as Maplewood grasped the weight of justice served, they had taken a crucial step toward healing, delivering a resounding message. The truth, however hidden, would always rise to the surface, shining against the unforgiving shadows. The aftermath. The world outside the Maplewood courthouse bustled with a bittersweet energy, a fleeting mix of relief and anguish resonating through the tightly packed streets. Although the verdict brought with it a sense of closure, it was overshadowed by the heavy grief that lingered throughout the community. Laura Sinclair stood at the forefront, bearing witness not only to the resolution of Amelia Hart's case, but also to the difficult road that lay ahead for those left in its wake. In the following weeks, the town slowly began to shift gears, grappling with the reality of Amelia's absence while attempting to reclaim the laughter that had once echoed through Maplewood streets. Candles adorned makeshift memorials in parks, while charitable initiatives emerged, aimed at honoring Amelia's legacy, scholarships bearing her name, donations to animal shelters, and support programs for teens struggling with similar adversity. It became evident that while one chapter had closed, the narrative of her life remained alive in the hearts and actions of the community. Yet, beneath this facade of healing lay discomforting truths. With Turner's conviction, the simmering undercurrents that had troubled the town began to surface. Laura watched as families rallied together, but she also witnessed fractures form as whispers of judgment spilled into the forefront, laying claim to the hearts of those who had failed to see the signs while Amelia walked among them. The guilt hung heavy, suffocating some with the burden of knowing they hadn't acted on the unspoken fears Amelia harbored. Laura, too, felt that weight press against her psyche. There was no denying her relief, but also an overwhelming sadness that pervaded her thoughts. The darkness that had gripped Maplewood hinted at issues far deeper than one young girl's tragedy could explain. Over the weeks that followed, she took to visiting local schools, speaking openly about the importance of kindness, communication, and vigilance, a proactive approach toward mental health that would help fortify bonds among teenagers on the brink of a struggle. Despite the pain lingering in the corners of her heart, she nurtured a flicker of hope, blossoming among the cracks of trauma. In her nightly reflections, memories of Amelia, a vibrant laugh, a heart full of dreams drifted around her like an ethereal presence, guiding her efforts with an unyielding spirit. Yet, even as momentum built for new dialogues and support, the shadows of the case remained. Rumors swirled, some concerning the veracity of Turner's actions, others hinting at potential accomplices. Laura understood that the truth was an evolving entity, refusing to be fully realized while hidden beneath layers of community denial. As she lounged one quiet night on her porch, a gentle breeze rustling the corners of her notepad, Laura reaffirmed her commitment. This was not merely a chapter closed. It was the beginning of a renewed pursuit drive to unearth those lingering whispers, the hidden pain that festered in silence, and the essential step of cultivating open dialogues in a community forged by secrets. She would continue to follow every lead, however faint, and unravel every thread. The echoes of Amelia's life resonated with clarity, now a poignant reminder that beyond justice lies the intertwining of lives and the consciousness of cultivating compassion. As stars glimmered above, Laura vowed to keep uncovering, to foster understanding, and to ensure that no voice would remain silenced again in Maplewood. Reflection. As the autumn leaves began to fall, swirling in vivid hues of gold and crimson, Laura Sinclair sat quietly in her office, reflecting on the tumultuous months that had passed since Amelia Hart's case first unfolded. The innocence of a community was shaken, challenged by the very shadows that had once protected them. Unseen dangers now laid bare in the harsh light of reality. She could still see Amelia's smiling face, her laughter echoing like a distant melody, a reminder of the life cut far too short. In the quiet moments, Laura grappled with the twin burdens of justice served and lives fractured. Though Dave Turner now sat behind bars, it was clear that the trial had unearthed scars much deeper than any single perpetrator could inflict. The complex web of relationships, the silent struggles endured by so many, painted a somber tableau that lingered in her heart. Community meetings began to take place, where people openly discussed not just Amelia's plight, but their own. It was an outpouring of vulnerable stories, raw emotions that ignited shared connections. Laura felt pride surge within her fist. It was transformation, a shift toward recognizing that the bonds formed by empathy could safeguard against future tragedy. Yet, she understood that reflections of the past would haunt her. There were lessons to learn, not just for Maplewood, but for every community gripped by secrecy. As she packed up her belongings at the end of the day, Laura silently reaffirmed her purpose to honor Amelia by pushing for transparency, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to safeguard the vulnerable and marginalized. In that moment of clarity, she understood that to honor those lost was to advocate for those still standing, to ensure that every story would be heard before it faded into obscurity.